Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as we say goodbye to Ben and Polly. There's something about airports where time stands still. Doctor Who can be, if you're so inclined, and as fans we tend to be, divided into distinct eras, each with their own flavour. For a show as long-lived as Doctor Who, it's only natural for it to shift its paradigm occasionally and therefore form little different pockets of time for the show to fit itself into. While it is true that each of these eras offer up their own take on Doctor Who, every so often a story comes along which transcends the era that it's in, and it wouldn't look out of place in any other era of the show. There are stories that become sort of timeless, and I think the Faceless ones is one of those stories. With the War Machine setting the precedent for the Doctor having adventures on contemporary Earth, I can easily see this story slotting in a little bit earlier, into Hartnell's latter time as the Doctor, even if it might have meant Ben and Polly's travels would have been even shorter. And it's not hard to imagine this becoming a Pertwee unit affair had it been made a couple of years later. Equally, I feel like it could be an early Tom adventure with the Brig in tow, or even with Lalla Ward's Romana in season 17. Tegan is inextricably linked to airports, so it's no real hardship for me to imagine Davison and company battling the chameleons in the 80s. Or even Colin and Nicola becoming embroiled in it. A Sylvester and Sophie caper wouldn't look or feel out of place, and I could even close my eyes and picture a Paul McGann big finish of the same strokes. And here we reach the nub of what I wanted to say. Any of the 21st century Doctors would slot easily into place in this story for a couple of reasons really. Firstly, because this story feels like a prototype for a story we still see made today. With it being on present day Earth, we can have a lot of fun with the Doctor sounding mad and being eccentric to those around him, while making perfect sense to us as he tries to get everyone to see the truth. They are less ready to believe him here than in the War Machines, which I suppose it's because the tale is taller and it takes a little bit longer for them to see any evidence of it themselves. But this makes it feel like a very real beginning for how Doctor Who would approach stories set contemporaneously. Secondly, because for all the talk I've made about little steps along the way where the Doctor feels more like the Doctor, this is where I honestly do think it clicks once and for all. He acquits himself very well here, perhaps better than any adventure yet. He takes control of the situation with aplomb, being able to run rings around both the chameleons and the Commandant before ultimately getting the better of both. He actually formulates a plan and executes it while on the move, improvising as he goes, and motivated by the actually rather terrifying notion of tens of thousands of kidnapped young people. When the Doctor pretends to be a chameleon, it's an absolutely brilliant performance on his part, and in my opinion, I don't think there's ever such a thing as proper Doctor Who. It can shoot off in many different directions and succeed in loads of different areas and turn its hand to pretty much anything. But I think you could show the Faceless ones to the children of today and it would recognisably be exactly the same show that they're used to, with exactly the same lead character as they're used to, behaving in exactly the same way that they are used to. When he engineers the chameleons turning on the director in the final episode, it's a really strong marker of how far the Doctor has come. And this Doctor in particular, when you think just a few stories ago he was still all over the place, to have coalesced this quickly afterwards is really something quite special. As soon as he gets leverage, the Doctor uses it for all he's worth. When he gets the upper hand, rather than triumphantly vanquishing the villainous aliens, he instantly launches into peaceful negotiations towards a coexistence. Now, this is the Doctor, and if there is such a thing as proper Doctor Who, it's this. This is also the story where the chemistry between Troughton and Hines firmly cements itself. The scenes in the airport with the Doctor and Jamie are delightful, and I really, really like how Jamie's misunderstanding of what to him is still the future doesn't yet have all the capabilities he's seen so far in his travels. It's barely noticeable with how it's performed, but an 18th century Highlander has just seen airplanes taking off and landing, so why wouldn't the murder that Polly witnessed be committed with a ray gun? That he so casually mentions that when describing it to security, only for the Doctor to ever so slightly despair because he knows what it must sound like, is one of my favourite bits of the story, and it only serves to highlight just how good these two are together. This is the way to handle a companion from Earth's history. Katerina, had she stuck around long enough, would have been just as good value in this regard, except with her, it wasn't just that no care was given to her character, it was almost as if nobody really wanted to give any care to her character, but not so with Jamie though, who is treated very, very well. When they're hiding behind newspapers, they couldn't be more conspicuous if they tried, but it's all just such fun. And when they're together, you kind of forget about Ben and Polly, which is just as well considering their prolonged absence from this story. Having finished filming during episode 2, Michael Craze and Annika Wills have very little part to play in this story, but with the Doctor and Jamie now the best of friends, it doesn't really matter all that much. I really like Ben and I really like Polly, but when Ben shows back up again in episode 2, a little bit of me is like, oh yeah, him. They're good characters and always have been thanks to Michael Craze and Annika Wills' valiant efforts, but they were just really unfortunate to share the TARDIS with Jamie, who the show came to favour a lot more. Them being slightly underwritten and not living up to their potential didn't really improve once Jamie came aboard and built an irresistible rapport with the Doctor. Ben just gets to run around Gatwick, but Polly at least gets something interesting to do, be frozen. Incidentally, one of the best scares Doctor Who has ever pulled off is the inanimate Polly in the crate. The story itself hits the ground running, and landing on the runway and having to flee from the plane is a brilliant opening. Despite thinking to myself, why wouldn't they just go back into the TARDIS, and wondering why they all scatter and run away from the police in the first place. Despite that, I just get so caught up in it. The design of the chameleons is really satisfying and their MO is nicely spooky. As a race, they make for excellent villains, and not just because of their gruesome disregard for our own species, but also just because of their total arrogance.
We are the most intelligent race in the universe.
Yeah, far from modest. As both the director and Inspector Crossland, Bernard Kay is fantastic. The subtle change in accent between the two works really well, and if it's noticed, helps to set up Jamie's de-Scottishing later on, which is really unsettling, despite the fact that it's actually closer to Fraser Hines' own voice. Anyway, as both goodie and baddie, Bernard Kay is the business. The whole cast are pretty solid. Pickering oozes venom, which then makes his acceptance of the Doctor's terms later a rather satisfying ending, which otherwise might have played out rather disappointingly. And Mama Cumberbatch, Wanda Ventham, does quite a lot with a rather lean part. But best of the lot, in my opinion, is one of the greatest companions who never was, Sam Briggs. Despite not meeting her yet on this go-around, I never used to be that fond of Victoria. That did change on the last marathon, and one of the things I'm most looking forward to on this marathon to see is if that remains the case this time round. Either way, whether I'm in a spell of liking Victoria or not, I have always preferred the idea of Sam going with them instead. I think I'd prefer season 5 a lot more with that complement than the one we actually have. But that is a moot point. It never happened, and I haven't got to season 5 yet. It might impress me a lot more this time around. Sam is so good that she's the first that I can remember to indulge in an on-screen snog with a companion. Considering he's a man out of time, Jamie is very comfortable as a time traveller now, getting on a plane, kissing the women, and generally just getting stuck in. While it does struggle to keep the rollicking pace all the way through, I think the words I would use are, it slows to a nonchalant saunter, because while it may slow down, I don't think it drags its feet. It slows the pace slightly, but still throws in new tidbits like the miniaturisation of the passengers and the Chameleon's mothership in orbit, so it stops it from going stale. With the victory over the director and the Chameleons having accepted the Doctor's terms, and again, just how brilliant is it to see the Doctor instantly using his upper hand for benevolence. So with all of that, it's now time to bid farewell to two companions who could have been so much more than they were. Not in the performances, I must stress. Annika Wills and Michael Craze they've been better than I think Ben and Polly have been. Ben and Polly have been brilliant to spend time with, but I do think that is down to Michael Craze and Annika Wills more than it is thanks to the scripts. I think Michael Craze and Annika Wills did probably about 150%, maybe 200%. I think some of the things they were given could be considered meagre scraps, but Annika Wills and Michael Craze were so good that they just elevated it all. I like Ben and Polly as much as I do because of the two actors and not because of the scripts that they were given. They get luckier than Ian and Barbara at any rate because they land on the same day that they left, which means that while the Doctor is taking on the chameleons about 60 miles north, his earlier self is battling Votan. I don't know why, but this sort of link to the past always goes down really well with me, even more when we consider what the next story is, that it kind of explains why the Doctor got the same sensation in the War Machines than when he fought the Daleks. Whether that's intentional or not, it's a lovely bit of symmetry. Despite them having landed where they left, Ben still offers to stay with the Doctor if he needs him, and I think that's the perfect summation of Ben. Loyal, brave, does what needs to be done, even if he'd rather bugger off. And Polly gets told to look after Ben, which I think is the perfect summation of Polly. Independent, resourceful, but inextricably linked to Ben. It's a very nicely done goodbye though, and after 162 episodes we plough onwards with possibly the greatest pairing to ever grace the roundels. The very real and tangible relationship being forged between Jamie and the Doctor. The James Bond death by really slow laser is daft even for this story. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this stopover at Gatwick, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a like and share it around. It really does help the channel in these early days. And what do you think of the Faceless ones? Is it as timeless as I've made out, or do you think it's Doctor Who at its most cookie cutter? Did Ben and Polly deserve a better goodbye, or was that never going to happen after having been so eclipsed by Jamie? And do you think they even were eclipsed by Jamie? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for the last appearance of the Daleks for a little bit. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you for the final story of Season 4.